Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Real Stories, Real Change. And this time we're talking to a lady who I met a few years ago now, online at a conference, and her name is Fee, Fee Love. So, welcome today, Fee.
Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you to the community for allowing this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. So, let's start at the beginning. So, tell me a little bit about what life was like before you made a change.
So, I suppose for me, the real turning point I've become kind of quite spiritual in nature and very into kind of numerology, energetics, and through various trainings that I've done in order to heal me, that's kind of evolved me onto the next part. So, as I reflect back, I realized that December 2012, which a lot of people refer to as cosmic moment, was a huge turning point in my life. And I suppose if I had to say, who was I probably see now that I was quite a lost soul, really. And that was the real start of the having, realizing that the going within is what would then start to permeate the outer changes. Um,
Mm,
I've identified lots of patterning now in my life, which I've had to work through in order to kind of become the new version of me. And yeah, it's been quite an intense. I mean, the last 2 or 3 years have been incredibly intense, but really from that point, we're
right.
what's that, 2012, like 12, 13 years ago now. It's been quite a journey of the self, so to speak. Mm.
Okay. And so, what was the actual turning point in your life?
I remember on that particular day, so I was married to my husband at the time, and we've got our daughter Katie. Um, I was at a sound healing day, kind of seeing life obviously from quite a different perspective. And, my hubby at the time was at a completely different place. And I think it started to highlight and reflect quite a few differences in, my outlook, in his outlook, and perhaps where life was taking us. And perhaps that was the point, me realizing that some really big changes were probably going to be made.
Mm.
And as it turns out, we actually separated in March 2013. So yeah, that was, not long after, there was quite a big turning point in
Yes.
life to start navigating.
So yeah, so talk us through that, navigating that journey. What happened?
Yeah, that was, well, that, I mean, through it, I've realized now that I've done a lot of my own healing through relationships. As I talk to you today, I have to work very hard at not judging, as I put that older version of myself. But I realize now I was only ever doing the very best I could do with the knowledge and consciousness I had at the time. I mean, if I could turn the clock back and make changes, I would. But obviously, that's my learning for this life. So I've done a lot of my healing through relationships. That's, been reflecting back to me the things that I needed to work on. So really, the start of that instigated me probably having to face life, on my own, which I now realize back then I was probably quite a codependent person, always looking for that external validation, and it tended to come in the form of partners that I was with.
Mm.
And so then I was living in Dubai at the time, and then I returned to the UK in 2014 June. So there was quite a grief process attached to leaving Dubai because I've been living out there for quite a long time, and then returning back to the UK, which I didn't see as a great positive moving forward step then, although I now realise it was quite necessary. And then I did get into another relationship fairly quickly. Which again over time I now realize was highlighting, a lot of the codependent behavior. It was ultimately really a fear of being alone, which
Mm.
I really didn't want to face. And that relationship was quite on off. Of course, March 20 we had COVID. And yeah, fast forward to now. So I did go through another relationship separation with that person back in 2023. So for the last 2 years, really, it has been me on my own.
Mm.
And the journey of what I've had to face within myself in that time it's been big, it's been
Mm.
harsh, but I'm really glad that I've done it. And
Yeah.
here
So
we
that uh, facing up to that issue of not wanting to be on your own. I think that's probably a fairly common thing for
Yeah.
people. So tell me how you worked through that, or what you had to overcome in doing that.
So I'm actually quite well trained in things like psychotherapy, coaching, and energy healing. So a lot of the tools that I have healed myself with, I've trained in those now to work in part of my practice. But I have also worked with other healers as well. In particular, there's one lady who does ancestral healing.
Mm,
And I just found that for some of those deeper core wounds, I couldn't do it myself. There was I think you can heal so much yourself, but when it comes down to that core personality of how you see yourself and who you've identified with for a long period of time, personally, I wasn't able to detach some of the behaviors from me. There was a
mm,
lot of self judgment going on, there was a lot of self depreciation, and I needed that other person to kind of hold space and help me reframe and see different things. So it's been a mix of me doing like various energy healing modalities and also working with other people as well.
mm. And you may not want to share this, but is it? Can you share anything about some of the those perhaps the wounds that you had to face up to and change, and what that realization was, having somebody else reflect it back to you?
So I think my biggest learning would have to be the effects of like what were low self-worth that were created in childhood. Now, a lot of those wounds did come from my parents, but again, it's not meant as a judgment, but that they were doing the best that they could. So in terms of moving forward, there has been a lot of forgiveness work and reframing and things,
Mm,
but the effect of low self-worth and then what that created in me going through adulthood. So there was the codependency, there was a huge amount of trying to find worth through external things. So for me, I became somebody who got worth through achieving. So,
mm,
needing to be the best in the class at school. And then as that went into adulthood, it was always doing more than anybody else or balancing more things than anybody else. And this was almost like a badge of honor that I had. It was a bit like that's how I got my worth. And obviously, something like that isn't sustainable in the long run. And then a lot of it was actually just needing to face those fears of being on my own. And so, really, the only way that I could heal that was to be on my own. It was almost like I had to go through that thing that was going to be the very worst thing for me. I know they always say about, finding the treasure in amongst the train wreck, I think Mike says, doesn't he? But I didn't want to go there. And I know the universe, it was almost like kicked, had to put me in the directions of things that I was really resisting and didn't want to face. But now, the bulk of the work is done. It's still a work in progress, but I can see why things had to be the way they were in order for me to go through that healing process. So, as much as it has been quite challenging, I do see now it as a positive thing. And I feel that the journey that I've gone through myself is what I'm going to be going out there and helping other people with, kind of moving forward.
And what would you say has been maybe the biggest challenge of going through that journey of learning to be on your own, or the biggest overcoming bit?
Do you know, I actually, I think the most challenging thing I found is having to heal loneliness and abandonment wounds while you're on your own and you don't have a huge support network. What's happened I've seen over the last few years is as I'm evolving, there are people who've left my life, or you have realizations perhaps about your family and things like that. There's almost that scenario of where you thought you would be, how life actually is.
Mm,
Whoa, okay, big difference. And then I've really had to train myself very hard not to go into judgment, not to go into should have done better. Da, 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 da. So the whole like having to navigate, a lot of this stuff when there are some days you just want to have a hug, when some days you just want somebody to be there, and of course they're not.
mm,
Which, but that I also learn is that's been forcing me to kind of go more within to myself, and obviously perhaps connect into that higher guidance, connect more into that authentic self. but that has definitely been quite difficult. I mean, I've had some wonderful friends come along, and they have been incredibly supportive, but sometimes it's like not having that significant other there
Mm,
to just, I don't know, we're humans at the end of the day, and there is something about physical touch, and there is something about, you know, humans are not great in isolation type things, so it's that needing to be isolated but actually desperately wanting connection at the same time.
and in that journey and that learning, is there a particular tool, that you found helpful to you that's kept you, or a strategy that you've used? Something like, some people say meditation, for example. Is there anything for you that you found particularly useful?
Meditation enormously, yes. Like, if I was having a really wobbly day, one of the favorite things to do is go down to the beach and ground, take the shoes and socks off, and just sit by the sea. I find water incredibly therapeutic. If it's not being at the sea, go and spend an hour in a hot bubble bath, and that transforms me. So,
Mm,
water incredibly important. Meditation and yoga, most definitely. And I suppose that the simplest thing of using the power of the breath and just connecting back into the heart space. So in those moments of, those overwhelm of emotions are coming up. I mean, obviously it's a practice. I can't say I get it right all the time, but instead of kind of going into that frenzy of doing, it's just in that moment to just stop and kind of recenter and ground and
mm,
take that time when everything else inside of you is kind of going into a fight, flight, freeze, but actually to take that time and just center
mm.
and come back in. And I mean, EFT, I think, is an amazing self help tool as well, tapping.
Yeah. Do you want to just, people may not know about that. Do you want to just explain what EFT is?
So EFT is emotional freedom technique or tapping. So that there's different cohorts of people. Like if you look online, there's a lot of information about it out there. But in essence, it's using a very light touch technique on. It's the same acupuncture points that would often be used in acupuncture with needles. But what we're doing is you gently tap on those points, and what they represent is within your body's energy system
Mm,
there are the meridians, and the points at which you're tapping on, which are quite close to the top of the surface, represent the end of those meridian points. So when you're tapping, you're basically shifting the energy within the body. So you might suddenly have tears, you might start noticing sensations in your body, but EFT is a wonderful way to be able to shift those emotions out of the body. And then once that's happened, you can tap in kind of the positive of, say, calmness or safety. And in that moment, it's a great tool that you can use yourself in any situation to kind of bring yourself back to that center and groundedness.
Well, I was going to ask that actually. So this is something that do you learn it from someone and then apply it, then you use it yourself, or is it something you self-taught, the tapping technique?
No, that I have actually. I'm actually a qualified EFT practitioner up to
Okay.
level 3. I mean, there is a lot of stuff if people are interested in tapping. There's an awful lot of stuff on the internet where you can find out for free, and the technique itself is relatively straightforward. What people might sometimes find is if they're working on deeper stuff, you might need that person to hold space for you. But in terms of just, even if you were tapping on this is the karate chop point. If you were out in public somewhere and you were just gently tapping on that, it's just something that will help you in that moment.
Mm,
And you can do it quite discreetly as well. Personally, I think EFT should be taught in schools. If our children had these kind of techniques taught to them in schools, I think it would make such an incredible difference.
mm. Now, when I first knew you and came across you had a different name. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that journey?
Oh, yes, that was a journey in itself. So, I mean, my original birth name was Fiona Burns, and I mention that because it's quite interesting, the numerology that's connected to the name. But I'll explain the other process first. So, I was Fiona Burns at birth, and then the person who I married in Dubai that I was making reference to earlier, he was actually, his surname is Fear, so I became Fiona Fear. So I actually had the name in total fear for about 25 years, all in all, because even when we separated and I came back to the UK, I kept that name because of my daughter. But what I found is as I was going on my spiritual journey, and the more, call it spiritual, that I got, a lot of people were saying to me, you need to change your name.
Mm.
And I was kind of like, yeah, okay, didn't do anything about it. And then at that point, I suppose my business was more psychotherapeutic. So, like, for example, I've trained in clinical hypnotherapy. So people were like, oh, Fear, did you make up your name to go with your job? So my name always seemed to create comments, and it got me remembered, not always for, great reasons, more for laughter or, hilarity, but it got me remembered. But as time went on, and obviously with the changes that I was navigating in myself, it kind of my own intuition was giving me this really strong message about you need to change the name. And the more I've got into the whole kind of, I suppose, healing and energy, and everything has a frequency and a vibration, it was really starting to hit home that I just had fear um, attached to my name the whole time, and I know you can reframe fear, which was, instead of what's it, false evidence appearing real, and then you can change it into face everything and run and all that, so I was using the positives of it, but I still had that name. And so I think it was one of my powerful numerology days last year. I believe it was 7/7 in 2024. I just had a moment of change your name. So
Mm.
there was this one particular name that had been lurking around in the background for quite a long time, but I was like, you're not actually really going to call yourself that, are you? And then did the whole, what am I going to call myself instead? And
Mm.
there were a few bit out there names, and my daughter was like, no, you're not going to call yourself that. So there was always this thing as well of like, oh, what are other people going to think? What's my daughter going to think? And I'd spoken to her about it. But then
Mm.
on this particular day, it was just a very clear download of, this is going to be your new name, do it. So
Mm.
deed poll was done, and it's a bit like, whoa. But it was very interesting then, the process that unraveled just by changing my name. It
Mm.
was almost like, because I changed the frequency, it was anything that didn't serve the new name then had to come up in a bit of a healing process as well. So yeah.
What kind of things came up then as a result of that?
Well, I suppose because, so then obviously, as you can see on the screen, my new name became Fiona Love. So I was Fiona Fear, and I went to Fiona Love, which I felt very much represented the journey of myself from fear to love. Which, if you want, in a moment, I'll share the Facebook post that I put out, because I think it
Sure.
sums up really well what I was thinking at the time with the name.
Mm.
But it was almost like fear was the vibration there. So when I changed the name to love, anything that didn't fit in with the vibration of love
Mm.
had to come up for healing. So although that name was changed on the 7th of July, 7/7, I didn't actually put it out into public until the 1st of November, 1/11. So,
Right. Mm.
there was all this wibbly wobbly. Like, I know in the first couple of weeks after I changed it, it's like, oh my God, what have you done? People are going to laugh at you. People are going to ridicule you. When I started to say the name for the first time, I couldn't stop laughing. And I'm like, right, well, you can't go out there and do that, can you? Like, what's your surname? Love. So it was a real process. And I know I was quite worried about what people were going to say, but actually, the amount of very positive feedback I got through changing my name, people were really kind and supportive. So
Mm.
yeah, but this is the post I put on Facebook, if it's okay to share.
Cool.
So I'd been quite quiet on social media for a few years because I was going through a lot of personal stuff. So I just kind of took myself off social media. So I've been very quiet on social media for a few years now. A lot has been going on behind the scenes, and I've navigated some huge personal changes, which have been hugely challenging at times. And it indeed has been a very transitional period of my life. But it's time to come out of the cave, so to speak, and emerge as the new me and start a whole new chapter of life. One of the things that I have been feeling strongly for some time now, as well as many people saying it to me, is that I need to change my name. Time to move on from fear. So it's time to say goodbye to my old name, though the stumbling block for a long time had always been, what would I change it to? I didn't feel a call to go back to my maiden name, and wanted something that really resonated and reflected what I wanted to embody in the world now. There was always one name that featured strongly in my mind, but I hesitated a lot about whether I should actually do it. Funny enough, largely out of fear of judgment and fear of ridicule. Not that Fiona Fear got away with comments, though. Lots of sniggers and laughter around that one. And is that really your name? And did you make that up because of your job? But anyway, drum roll, the new name, as you now know, Fiona Love, although I prefer using Fee. And I feel it perfectly represents who I want to embody being in the world. To always be connected with love, especially love for self, and to embody love in everything that I do. To share love as much as I can with the world, and to help bring about unity and togetherness and much needed positive change, which all starts within. As Michael Jackson sings in his powerful song, Man in the Mirror, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make that change. Love indeed is the highest vibrational frequency you can live by, with fear being the polar opposite. It also represents the lighter side to life, the fun and laughter. To not take oneself too seriously, to smile and have humour, and the humour perhaps related to this name, but also be bold enough not to care about the judgments and comments which may come from others, and instead be comfortable in my choices, which may be different or seem silly to others, but instead to live my life authentically and with what feels right for me. It also very much represents the personal journey that I've done from myself, from fear to love. Quite probably the name of a book in the future. Going from someone who subconsciously lived from a place of fear most of their life, fear of rejection, not being enough, not feeling worthy, to name but a few, to being someone who now holds a very high level of self love and self acceptance, but of course, which remains a work in progress. And someone who wants to take all her experiences and lessons to help empower and support others and indeed make the world a better place. My business is also undergoing a resurrection and rebrand, and so the new name also largely links in with that really well. So it was like huge love and light, feel love. so, um,
Wonderful.
and as I said, the numerology, when I was checking out the numerology of the new name, um, so interestingly, if you're kind of into numerology, so my original maiden name, Fiona Burns, was very much under a one vibration, which is all about leadership and strength. Fiona Love is 9, and it's all about completion. And I just thought it was so reflective of how I came into the world as a 1, and this new name is a 9. I know that I still have to go out there and be a leader, but it's kind of under a different way and a different energy. And there was also Chaldean astrology. I don't know a lot about that, but when I was actually looking into is this a good vibrational match, it came up as 97%. So there was a lot of kind of numerology and energy stuff as well to support me making this change, which was really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yes, thank you. And just again, for somebody listening who doesn't really know anything about numerology apart from having heard the word, can you just explain briefly what that is and why that's important to you?
Oh, so I kind of believing that everything has a frequency and a vibration. So even like solids in the world, if you take it down to kind of the quantum and atomic levels, everything has a frequency of vibration. And I know that the numbers, if you take everything down to binary, like the numbers kind of represent a lot of the basis in the world. I think you're kind of going into sacred geometry territory a little bit as well. But um the numerology, so like there's certain numbers going from 1 to 9, which basically represent, I suppose, certain qualities or certain concepts if you're open to them. So, like we're in now, it's April, that's a 4 vibration. April tends to be about like solid foundations, really putting in good structure and things like that. And I personally have just found by bringing into the numerology and things like in life, like human design as well, aspects of human design, that I've been able to understand myself better. And once you start to make the realizations, a lot of things started to make a lot more sense. And I,
Yeah.
I just found it's a tool which further supplements maybe understanding, like higher, I don't know what the like quantum type work or I know it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but for me personally, I found it really useful and a really powerful tool.
Thank you. Thank you. And what's life like now then?
Ooh,
Mm.
well, I feel that I'm in and going to the numerology. The universal year is 2025. That's a nine vibration, and I personally in a personal year, which is also a nine vibration. So at the moment, that there is a huge amount of what feels like endings to come into the new beginnings. Now, I'd be a liar if I said I'm finding some of these endings very comfortable. No, it's still at the moment, yes, some quite uncomfortable moments, but it's going into that faith and trust of being okay, perhaps, with what I'm not knowing what's coming next, but just trusting that everything is going to be okay. And so I kind of, with my own intuitive feeling and what my numerology is indicating, I'm going to go into what I call one new beginnings more in September. So at the moment, I feel like it's the endings are coming, and that's making way for the new beginnings. But I don't think they're probably going to take off more till the end of this year, going into next year as well. But I've been finding the current energies very, very difficult at times to navigate, and stuff is coming up seemingly whether I want it to or not. So I'm just having to surrender and trust the process of what's going on there. But feeling a lot more positive. It's the whole concept of alone, which I was very uncomfortable with. I'm very at peace with that now. And the crazy thing was, I've always been someone who loves my own company. So it wasn't that I had an issue being on my own, it was just certain aspects of being on my own. I mean, I'm hoping that one day I am able to have that what I would call interdependent relationship instead of the codependent ones that I was having. But rather than be chasing things now, I'm very happy to kind of be authentic in me and trust that the right things will come to me, and the not so authentic things will move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of trust and surrender going on at the minute.
Thank you. And just finally, for anybody else listening to this who, might be going through something similar, what advice would you give them, or is there a quote that you'd like to leave with them?
So I suppose really it's about not running away from those uncomfortable things that might be coming up for you. And one of the biggest phrases that I've really taken to heart this year has been, everything is happening for me, not to me. That, because previously, sometimes it'd be, oh, why is this happening to me? Almost feeling like a victim and not being happy for it. But obviously now in hindsight, realizing actually that thing that was perceived as not great has actually been a huge gift to me. So now just going with, everything is happening to me, everything is happening for me, not to me. What else did I write down, because I was just trying to think of what phrases really. I always strongly resonate with, be the change that you want to be in the world. And really just to remember that ultimately that relationship with ourselves is the most important one to nurture, because when we have that right relationship with ourselves, that's the foundations then for all of the other relationships that you will have in life. And if you don't properly love yourself, you will never be able to properly like love another, perhaps without some sort of like dependency or need. And so just always like to go within. um I always love that phrase, as within, so without. So if you need to make a change on the outer, look at you first, and see what perhaps needs to be done there too. But remembering as well, there's the perfection in the imperfection.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
everything has to be perfect.
Thank you. Well, feel love. Thank you very much for sharing your
You're
journey with us
welcome.
today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.